For the first time in recorded history, more Americans are moving to Europe than the other way around. For 200 years, Europeans were moving to the US. And for many of us, this was our family. I mean, that's the case for me. My grandparents both came to the US from Ireland, and my grandma even came over on a boat. And now you're seeing a lot of the ancestors of these people turning right back around and moving back to Europe, right? So we had all of these people for centuries coming to the US for more jobs, a better future, the American dream. And now many of us are going back. There has been a 102% increase in citizens expatriating, like from the US, in 2025 compared to 2024 Q1. 102% increase. A 2025 Gallup poll said that 1 in 5 Americans would migrate given the opportunity. And there's that famous Gallup poll in 2025, 40% of women aged 15 to 44 said that they would move abroad permanently if they had the opportunity, which is 4 times higher than the 10% who shared that desire in 2014. Now, Europeans still account for around 10% of the 46 million immigrants living in the US, but European migration to the US has been declining, particularly from Western and Southern Europe, as most Europeans now prefer to migrate within their own continent. So, why is this happening? Right? I can give you all of the stats and all of the statistics, but what am I seeing on the ground? As someone who's been living abroad for 13 years, who currently lives in Spain, and who helps people migrate from the US to other countries for a living. I've been helping people from the US move abroad since 2018. I've been living abroad since 2013. What am I seeing on the ground with the hundreds and hundreds of people who contact us every month? Well, in the past, I noticed, and this is my own experience as well, that most people were moving abroad for the adventure, right? People had, these are people who'd always wanted to live abroad or had been thinking about it and dreaming about it for a very long time. Maybe you loved a very particular country and wanted to move there, or you just wanted travel and new experiences. And yeah, there were very real issues in the US, but that was always secondary. So I'll use myself as an example. I first moved to China in 2013, and I was not looking to live there permanently, right? I studied abroad there. I just wanted the experience. I wanted a challenge. I wanted to try new things. I wanted to learn and grow and surround myself with people who had a vastly different background, cultural experiences. I wanted to really learn on the ground, like, what is it like to live in China and how do Chinese people view their own government? Like, those were the types of things I was looking to learn. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted every day to be a new and exciting adventure. And it was only years later of living overseas that I realized that the US has a lot of issues that many other countries don't have. And I'm not saying that all other countries are perfect, especially not China, but I am saying that that perspective of living abroad and traveling and spending time, significant time in other countries, opened my eyes to some of the ways in which the US is not perfect and can improve, right? Like, we all know China and many other countries around the world have their own issues, right? But this experience just showed me some ways that the US could do things better. But I have seen a real shift, especially in recent years, like the last 2 years or so. It really started in 2024 in the lead up to the election, that there is a shift in who is looking to move abroad and why. I mean, many of the people who come to me, who work with me, have always wanted to live abroad, are interested in a particular country, have wanted this for years and years and years. And politics and other issues with the US are secondary. However, overall, I have seen this real shift in that many people in the US are scared, right? There is a real fear. especially in 2024 in the lead up to the election, I got a lot of people attending my live boot camps, and I run these usually twice a year. People are interested in moving abroad. I run these huge events, hundreds of people come, and I was a little bit shocked. I wasn't quite anticipating the amount of fear that people were feeling in their bodies, right? Coming into this event, it was palpable, and there were a lot of contingency plans as well. People saying, "Well, if Trump's elected, where am I going to go? What's my next step? I have my plan A and I have my emergency plan B." And still to this day in 2026, I am building with people their plan A and their emergency contingency plan B, and this is something that I've never done in the past. I am getting a lot more people coming to me saying, I need to get out now. Where can I go as soon as possible? This urgency that just didn't exist in the past when I first started this business. And even among those who are not panicked, right? I have many people coming to me who are not panicked, who are not in a fight or flight sense of fear. I'm still seeing a lot more of the people that come to me coming primarily because they don't want to be in the US anymore. And so that's a big shift from what I was seeing in the past, which was people where the main reason why they wanted to go was, for travel, for the adventure, for the opportunity, because I love a specific country, etc. Now I'm getting a lot of people where they say their primary reason for wanting to move abroad is because they want to get out of the US because they don't want to be there anymore. And they start, when I ask, why do you want to move abroad? People will often, now that I'm working with, start by listing all of the things that they don't like about life in the US that they want to get away from. And this is a big shift that I'm seeing just in the last year or so. And so what I tend to do with the people that I work with is say, okay, every feeling that you're feeling right now, it's valid, and I'm glad that you know why you want to leave. But now my question for you is, what do you want? Right? We know all the things that you don't want, but what is it that you do want? Right? I want you working towards something rather than, it's like running towards rather than running away. Right? I want you working toward a life that you want rather than just, I need to leave this life right now because I don't like it. Right? Like, what do you want? And so a lot of now what I do with people when we first start working together is get really, really clear on what you do want so that you actually love the life that you're building overseas. Because if you're just moving around because you don't like what you have right now, that is a recipe for not loving your life abroad, right? So we need to be clear on what we do want and work towards that. So we could actually love the life that you are building, that you're waking up to each morning. So in this episode, though, in this video, I want to talk about what I'm seeing on the ground, right? I want to show you what I am seeing as someone from the US who has been living abroad for 13 years. I want to show you what I'm seeing on the ground in terms of why my clients want to move abroad, why the people who I meet from the US living overseas, why they have decided to stay internationally. My perspective from somebody who now lives in Europe, who lives in Spain. I can tell you right now, I'm not talking to a lot of people in Europe who want to move to the US. I don't think I have met a single person in the last couple of years who's wanted to move to the US from Europe. So that's saying something, but I want to show you what I'm seeing because I'm really on the front lines here. Like, I am helping people from the US move abroad, and I am also from the US living in Europe. And so before I tell you what these reasons are, I want you to hear my thoughts on this, okay? I don't hate the US. I think we need to clarify that. I don't hate the US, but I also have no desire to live there. Okay? I'm going to be straightforward honest with you. I have no desire to move back there except for, spend time with my parents, right? But even they live in an area of the US that I'm probably not going to even be living in if I were to move back. But I have no desire to move back to the US anytime soon. I could live almost anywhere in the world. There are a lot of countries that will grant me a visa, especially with the fact that I run a business online and the emergence of digital nomad visas and entrepreneur visas. I have a lot of options on where I could live, and I chose to live in Spain. Okay, many of you have been following on for a while now, know that I did a whole narrowing down process, a 2-month long scouting trip where we visited 3 different countries, and I am choosing to live in southern Spain. But I still care what goes on in the US. I vote in every election. I campaign for what I believe in politically. I just do it from abroad. Now, I am not saying that every American believes the things that I'm about to tell you. Okay, what I am saying is that these are the most common things on the minds of the people who I talk to. And now, who am I talking to? The people who want to move abroad from the US. Okay, so the Americans coming to me who want to move abroad, and the majority of the people that I work with are interested in Europe. It is quite popular. We help people move anywhere, but Europe is very popular. So these are the reasons why the Americans who want to work with me to move abroad are coming to me, why they want to leave the US, okay? And there are about 7 primary reasons why these people that I'm working with are wanting to leave. And now I know some of you listening to this, especially on YouTube, are going to have some thoughts and feelings. And that's what the comments section is for. Have fun. All right. So now let's dive into these 7 major reasons that I see the Americans that I work with, why they want to leave the US, why they want to move elsewhere. And so these are their primary motivating factors for wanting to migrate to Europe, and things that they are, let's be real, wanting to leave behind. So the first one that I see, and this is more recent in the last few years, is political instability and human rights as a category. Okay, so there are a lot of fears that I'm seeing from people around the actions of our current government, of Trump, of Congress, all of the current governing power, mainly in the US, and where that government is actually going to take us. What is the future of the US? Specifically, rights being taken away. And more specifically, we're talking LGBTQ rights, specifically trans rights. I'm saying specifically a lot, but LGBTQ rights, trans safety, and women's rights around bodily autonomy. I've even talked to women who are worried that, hey, someday I might not even be allowed to have a bank account anymore. I mean, these are the conversations that I'm having with people. Fears that they will shut the borders and not allow anyone out of the country. And before you say that these people are completely crazy, it's not unfounded. Right? The US has not done this, but other countries have. I think one very prominent example of this is Iran, right? Like, you have seen there are many countries in the world that roll back on women's rights, and roll back on LGBTQ rights. And we are seeing this happen in real time, right? Roe v. Wade was overturned. Many states are changing rules and laws around LGBTQ rights, specifically trans rights. And there are some real fears, and also fears around safety as well. I work with a lot of people who either are trans or they have like a trans, adult or teenage child, and they're concerned about the safety of either themselves or their child, right? And so I'm not going to sit here and pass judgment on whether or not any of these things will happen, despite, going to school in Washington, D.C. and majoring in international affairs. I'm not enough of a political expert to sit here and pass judgment on whether or not any of these things will happen. And what I am saying is that this is a very real fear of many of the people who come to me. Right? Is this fear of my rights are going to be taken away, a fear of the direction of our current government and where that's taking us? And there's a large percentage of Americans who come to me who are concerned about this. I even get people who are like, "Hey, if World War III is going to start, I don't want to be here." And I'm like, "Hey, yeah, if World War III starts, I probably wouldn't want to be in the US either." So fair. Now, I will say the second, or I guess reason number 2 that people come to me is social values not aligning with the US. So I would say that this is a little less fear-based, but in a very similar vein, not loving the direction where the US is headed, both politically, but just in terms of social values. Okay. So it's really this feeling of my personal values don't align with US politics, US culture, where our tax dollars are being spent. So it's a little less, I need to get out for my own safety, and a little bit more, there is something here that's unaligned in terms of my values, right? I want to live in a country where my taxes go towards healthcare and education and public transportation, not golden ballrooms and bombs. I want to live in a country that values helping people, the poor, people with major health conditions, equal access to food and education. That's what's important to me. Those are my values, and the country that I'm living in is not aligned with those values. Equality for sex and gender, for the LGBTQ community. I want to live in a country that has vacation time that you're actually allowed to take, mandatory maternity and even paternity leave, actual sick leave for companies. If a company wants to let you go, they have to give you actual notice, and there are real support systems in place to keep you from backsliding into poverty, right? Countries that prioritize the environment, healthy food, especially those people who lean more liberal. Moving to a country that aligns with your values, this tends to match up with many countries in Europe, specifically like Northern, Western, and a bit of Southern Europe, right? Like if you lean liberal, the countries that align most with a lot of those values, and they tend to be in Europe, right? And so I have noticed that for many of my clients moving to Europe specifically, living in a country that has values that align with yours tends to be a little bit higher on the list, more so than my clients who are moving to like Central South America, Asia, Africa, things like that. So I will say this isn't everyone, but it's definitely something that comes up a lot. Another one that comes up a lot is cost of living. This is number 3. So here's the situation. I think we all know there's a cost of living crisis in the US right now, and the US has become unaffordable for most people. I remember back in the day when having a salary of 100K was actually a big deal and meant something. And now you get many people who are making 100K salaries in the US, and if you live in a major city, it's often not enough, which is just crazy to me, but it's true. And then when you look at, for example, retirees who saved up a certain amount of money to be able to last them the rest of their lives, and now they're thinking, do I got to go back to work? I've talked to people who have $1 million saved for retirement who are worried that it's not enough and they're going to be the old lady eating cat food. And I thought in the back of my head, now this was a couple years ago, I was thinking that's $1 million is more than enough. Like, I think she's just a little bit, some people a little bit more worried about money than others. And I'm like, oh, she'll be fine. But recently I was talking with someone in the US about that and said, she had $1 million saved for retirement and she was worried it wasn't enough. And that person and a few others chimed in as well, said, no, $1 million isn't enough. If you live in a major city, which this person was from LA, it's not enough. And I'm sitting here, especially after 13 years of living abroad, I'm sitting here and I'm going, since when is $1 million not enough for retirement? Right? But if you retired a couple years ago thinking $1 million was enough, what are you supposed to do now? Every time I go back to the US, it feels as if things have doubled in price. I was just there actually last week. Actually, fun fact, I just got back from the US yesterday as of recording this episode. I just got back. And I went to Walmart of all places because it was next to my hotel. And a package of Dayquil, NyQuil together was like $32. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, why is this so expensive? And then I was, I was there for a business and like a networking event, and everywhere we went, every restaurant, every bar, a glass of wine was $15 to $17 a glass. And I'm like, what? Why is a glass of wine so expensive? what I paid to, and this is obviously, wine is not a necessity, right? And I'm just sitting here in shock, and I'm like, I paid more in a tip for this glass of wine than I pay to enjoy a glass of wine at a restaurant in Spain. What is going on here? I was in a car with a couple of the women in my business program, and they were talking about where we were, which was just outside Nashville, and they were saying, "Oh, this area is super cute." I was actually looking up rents for places around this area, and it's super affordable. It's only $2,000 for a one bedroom. And I literally almost spit out my coffee, and I was like, "What?" And they were like, "Oh, Michelle, well, how much do you pay in rent?" And I said, I pay $2,000 a month for a 4 bedroom, fully furnished apartment with a view of the Mediterranean. And they were like, "Oh, God, Rochelle, I hate you." But that's the situation. And I would say I'm paying more than most of my clients and most of my friends who live here because our place is 4 bedrooms, and I have my own private office and things like that because I work from home. But I would say I'm paying a lot more than the people that I know. I mean, Evan, who lives here and has a 1 bedroom, he's paying, well, hopefully he doesn't mind me saying this, he's paying 1,200 a month, right? But they were talking about, oh, only 2K for a 1 bedroom, and I'm like, oh man, you guys just come move to Spain, jeez. But that this is the reality, is 2K for a 1 bedroom in a lot of cities is considered quite affordable. Now, if you have an income that can travel with you, let's say you work for yourself online in any capacity, or you have passive income, or you are retired, you can actually take that money with you to a country with a slightly lower cost of living because your savings, because your income can travel with you, right? And I have retirees say to me, "Am I crazy for retiring outside the US?" And I said, "You'd be crazy not to. If you're worried that your money is not going to last, you could take it to a country with a lower cost of living where it actually will last." Where I talk to a lot of people doing some variation of the FIRE movement so they can retire early. And they go and they move to a country that's more affordable so that they can retire earlier. Right? If you're making 100K a year in your business, that's not your take home. That's your revenue, right? What's your take home? For many people who work for themselves, that's a struggle. So then those same business owners come to me and say, I'm a coach, I'm a freelancer, I'm a consultant, I have online courses. I could do this from anywhere. Why am I doing it from here when I could do it from a place with a much lower cost of living? Personally, I built up my business Move Abroad coach from Tbilisi, Georgia. So that's the country, not the state. And when I first started, my rent was $500 per month. And my health insurance, we'll get to healthcare in a minute. My private health insurance was $37 a month. So this was something where I could actually afford to take the leap and work for myself, whereas I would not have been able to afford that in the US. So what we're seeing, and I'm not here to cast a value judgment on it, I'm just here to show you what I'm seeing, is that people are realizing from the US that their money is not going far enough. And with the rise in people working remotely, and then also the rise in people working for themselves, they're looking at, hey, I have a location independent income I could feasibly take anywhere. Why am I doing it from here when I could go somewhere else? Right? And when you're moving to these countries, you contribute. You pay taxes, right? I pay taxes in the countries that I live in. But there's less financial stress on you from moving. When you move to a country with a slightly lower cost of living, but you keep your income or you keep your savings level the same, this allows you to do things like have one partner work while the other partner takes care of the kids from home, or works on their novel, or goes back to school. I mean, I had one client where, he had never had the opportunity to go to university because he had to work from 18 years old. And now that they live in Mexico, She is able to support the whole family, including their two kids, on one income, and he is able to get his bachelor's degree online. And that is something that they were never able to do in the US. They lived in the Midwest, and all they did was work. They would take shifts. He would work during the day and she would teach English online at night. They never saw their kids. They were constantly stressed, constantly hustling. They moved to Mexico, live in a nice house. She supports the whole family on one income, and he finally gets to go to school. Right? This is the lifestyle in terms of cost of living that many Americans are looking for. I want to work fewer hours so that I can be there at school pickup and spend time with my kids. Right? I don't want to have to kill myself to make ends meet, hustling, working my main job and two side hustles. For me personally, I spend 320 euros per month on daycare for my 2-year-old daughter. And it's from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Right? 320 euros per month. And this is even though it's private, right? She's only 2. The government partially subsidizes it because they want childcare to be affordable. And we'll talk a little bit more about that daycare later, but everyone who works there has a degree in early childhood education. They do like Pinterest level activities with the kids each day. And she served a 3-course meal for lunch. Okay, this is the quality that we're talking about. And it gives her an opportunity to learn Spanish. Meanwhile, I look at what my friends are paying in the US for childcare, and it's completely unaffordable, right? We have parents who are trying to decide, does it make financial sense for me to work? Or is the cost of childcare so high that I am going to lose money by putting my children into childcare? And if you want to stay home with your kids, that is fantastic, right? I love that you have the option to do that. But what we want is options, right? So I'm seeing many women who are trying to decide, should I put my kid into childcare even though I make less money than what childcare costs? But then we have the opportunity cost of missing out on X amount of years in my career. Like these are the financial math decisions that couples are having to make. Or I really want to take a break from this job or leave a toxic work situation, but I can't because healthcare. Right? Like these are the math decisions that we're making. And so many Americans are deciding, you know what? I'm done. I'm opting out and I'm going to move to a country where I can actually enjoy my life. And I don't even want to get started on saving up for college or our student loan debt. Like that's a whole nother conversation, but that is coming up as well. But now I want to move to number 4, which is lifestyle. Okay. So I was talking about actually being able to enjoy your life, not needing to constantly work and hustle to make ends meet. And this is a really core reason why so many Americans are coming to me interested in living abroad. I see people saying, I am so exhausted by the overworking hustle culture of the US. Some people describe it as a rat race, right? Working 60 to 80 hours a week. Apologizing for taking vacation. If somebody asks you how you are, instead of saying good, now the average answer is, oh, busy, right? We use busy as a badge of honor culturally. Human beings are not meant to live like this. We are not meant to work even 40 hours a week, let alone 60 or 80 hours a week, and not take vacation and not spend time with our family and our friends and be outside in nature. And there is this strong feeling from a lot of people that come to me around moving abroad who say, I'm sick of this. This is actually, to be honest, probably the main reason. Maybe there should have been one, but I would say, now that I think about it, this is probably the main reason, the main motivating factor for leaving the US out of all of them is this one. I don't want my life to be like this anymore. I am exhausted. I'm not enjoying my life. People are looking for slow mornings with a cup of coffee at a cafe on a historic street, walkable cities, going to the beach at the end of the day, late night tapas with a bottle of wine, hopping on public transportation. That picture that I'm painting, be it, Germany or Spain or the beaches of Portugal, be it whatever country you're envisioning, when you close your eyes and you picture the life that you want to live overseas, that's what people are looking for. Getting away from the constant work, hustle, car, processed food, constantly busy, constantly hustling, never seeing my friends, to actually living and enjoying life. And there is this perception that we have culturally, like as Americans, when we look at Europe, we go, oh, they actually enjoy their lives. They actually live their lives. They don't just live to work. And so a lot of the Americans coming to me are looking for that. Like that's the life that they want, especially the ones moving to Europe. And so I actually did a quiz a while back talking about, because I was quoted in an article around like health and living abroad. And so I listed out a bunch of reasons why you might want to live abroad for your health. And by far, the most popular one was not needing a car. This is really big one that comes up. And now it's not to say that everyone who comes to me doesn't want to have a car, but I would say it is very, very high on the list of a lot of people that I work with. And I think they kind of relate to me because let's be real, I have never owned a car in my life. I have never had in the 13 years I've been living abroad, I have not owned a car. I don't really need one, especially where I live now. Right now, I live in Malaga in southern Spain. Let me just describe for you the public transportation situation. So I can walk pretty much anywhere. I can walk from where I live to Old Town, like the historic area where there's a lot of shops and restaurants, in like 20 minutes. I walk my daughter to daycare. It takes 20 minutes for me to walk there. And it's not along a highway. Like there are shops and restaurants and cafes and walking only streets that I walk along. I can walk to 5 different grocery stores in less than 10 minutes. There are 5 different playgrounds within walking distance from my house, 3 of which are like right next to my house. I can walk pretty much anywhere I need to go. And then I have a subway stop pretty close to my house. I would say it's like a 7-minute walk, but they're about to open a subway stop literally right outside my front door. There are tons and tons of buses. I can take a bus to the beach in 15 minutes. What else? I have the long distance train station and the long distance bus station are both a 15-minute walk from my house. To get home from the airport yesterday, I took a train, one of the, I guess like an intercity train. Took me about 15 minutes to get into Malaga, and then it was like another 15-minute walk to my house. Like that is the situation that we're talking about here. I don't need a car. I rarely, the last time I took an Uber here was because I had a flight to catch at 6 a.m. and public transportation wasn't open yet at 4 a.m. in the morning, right? Like, I don't need a car. And this is the life that I'm living here. And this is the lifestyle that so many people from the US are attracted to, right? We want to walk places. We want public transportation. We want free and affordable community spaces where you don't have to pay money to exist and meet up with people. We want to enjoy life, to travel on the weekends. We don't want to cram all of our travel into a 2-week vacation per year. We want to be able to incorporate travel into our lives. Fresh air, sun on your face, moving your body, getting away from the computer, interacting with people and socializing. You know, I had a friend back in when was this? 2023. She visited me from the US and it was November and she didn't bring a coat. And I said to her, the weather is very similar in Seattle. Like, I didn't think to remind you to bring a coat. Why didn't you bring a coat? Right? Like, we're going to be outside. Why didn't you bring a coat? And she said to me, I didn't think that I would need one because in the US, I'm never outside. And I said, what do you mean you're never outside? But she worked from home for Amazon, which, let's be real, from what I've heard is a very toxic workplace. And she was working like 60 plus hours a week, basically doing 2 people's jobs for the price of one. Because, of course, we hear that a lot from people who work for companies in the US, like large corporations. But she was working like 60 plus hours per week. There was nowhere walkable from her apartment. I've been to her apartment before. There is nowhere you can walk. Nowhere. And so she drives everywhere. So she's never outside. She goes from her apartment straight into her car, turns on the heat, and then drives. And then drives to a place where there's a parking lot and then immediately walks inside. So she didn't think about the fact that she would need a coat because she's never outside. And she said to me after 2 days of visiting me in Tbilisi, she's like, I feel so much better walking everywhere. Like, I just didn't realize how much my body was craving this. And I feel it the other way around. Every time I go to the US, I don't feel good because I'm not walking. I'm not moving my body in the natural way that bodies are meant to function, right? Like, we are meant to walk and be standing. I say this as I'm sitting here recording, but we are meant to be standing and walking much more than the average person is in the US. So I want to describe my day for you today, which is Monday, right? It's afternoon on a Monday. Let me just describe an average Monday for you, okay? So I woke up with my daughter around 7 a.m. because that's when she woke up. I could have slept in a little bit later, but that's when she woke up. And so I got her ready for school. We had breakfast at home, and then we walked 20 minutes to her school. And as I mentioned, this is not along the side of a highway. This is along shops, restaurants, cafes, like very walkable sidewalks straight to her school. I drop her off, and then I walked about 15 minutes from her school into Old Town, into the old historic district, where I met up with Evan from our team, who also lives in Malaga, for a cup of coffee, and we had our meeting in person. Because even though we work online, we can't work from anywhere, we live in the same city. So I said, let's do an intensive 90-minute meeting. Let's meet in person. So we met in person, and then we walked from the old historic district back towards where I live. It was about a 20-minute walk for me. He walked with me because he was going to the gym at what time was it? Noon on a Monday. He was like, you know what? I'm going to take a break and go to the gym. So he walked with me towards his gym, and then I walked the rest of the way home, which is about 20 minutes. So I'm not going to do the math on somebody do the math for me in the comments, the amount of time I've spent walking today. Oh, and the coffee at the cafe that I bought was €3. Then I got home, and I have my private office at home with a view of the Mediterranean out the window. It's a far away view, but I can still see the sea from my house. And, I'm recording a podcast, getting work done. Now, my husband's going to go pick up my daughter at 4:30 p.m. when she finishes school and take her to the park. And there are about 4 parks on the way home from her school to our house. So they're going to have their pick over which park they get to go to. And, then we'll go to the grocery store, which, like I said, there's like 5 grocery stores within easy walking distance from our house. We'll go to the grocery store, we'll pick up some dinner, and we'll cook a healthy dinner with affordable, high quality ingredients. And that's our Monday. That's an average Monday. Just look at the amount of time I've spent walking, the amount of time outside. My meeting at a cafe cost me €3. Like, we're out, we're enjoying life. And when you factor in, and this is my, we're getting on a little tangent here, but my philosophy around building a freedom life and working for yourself, like, that allows me to work the hours that I want to work, to start work a little bit later because I bring my daughter to school. And, it allows Evan to, from our team, to go to the gym at noon on a Monday. Like, we can just do that. Right. And when I paint this picture for people from the US, I get this feeling of, oh my God, what I wouldn't give to live life like that. And I'm not saying my life is perfect, right? Like, we all have our own challenges, but this life was made by design. It was made intentionally. And I am seeing a lot of people from the US seeing that, especially with, I want to say, the rise of social media, but like the prevalence of social media in our lives, seeing people living life like this and saying, I want that, right? I want my life to look like that. And, especially with the amount that people are traveling as well, like going to Europe and having dinner at 8 p.m. and looking around at all the locals in the restaurant and saying, wow, these are all people who live here, and they are enjoying a glass of wine at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday when they're supposed to have work the next day, and their kids are running around like playing football in the plaza, and they're just there with their friends on a Tuesday night eating tapas and drinking wine and laughing, and you from the US sit there and you see that and you go, why can't my life look like that? And then you realize, oh, if I moved here, it could. And so I spent a while on this one, but I would say actually this is like the main reason why many people from the US are wanting to move abroad. Now, I will say number 5, it's kind of in that vein of living a healthier life, is health and food. Right? We already talked about the amount that I walk and fresh, healthy ingredients, but there are a lot of concerns from people in the US around processed food, what's in it, our food is killing us, that type of thing. Now, this is a very commonly held belief by people who are leaving. And now I am not a food expert or nutrition expert, but I will say that many people who come to me have major concerns around the food that we're putting in our bodies in the US. I see a lot of people with gluten and dairy sensitivities that don't have issues when they're overseas. I'm going to tell you my personal experience with dairy. This is super random. So I can't really eat a lot of dairy in the US because not lactose intolerance. No. I have an allergic reaction to certain, it's mainly processed dairy in the US where my mouth gets swollen. Like I have little chipmunk cheeks, like the inside of my mouth swells up, especially where my cheeks are. It's harder to talk. I feel like my face is all puffy. And this started, I would say, about 6 years ago. And every time I go back to the US, it gets worse and worse. And this is something that has only ever happened to me in the US. It has never happened to me anywhere else in the world. So I started doing some research and I was like, what is this? And why do I have an allergic reaction in my mouth to dairy in the US? This doesn't make any sense, right? Like, what is this coming from? And actually, this is a documented phenomenon in some people where the US has more like highly processed dairy, and they often add things like gums and emulsifiers to dairy products to keep the half and half like cream from separating, or to keep your shredded cheese clumped together in your processed cheese on your frozen pizza, like that sort of thing. And so one that has been documented as giving people allergic reactions, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this, but it's called carrageenan. So my hypothesis is that I'm allergic to carrageenan or some sort of other gum or emulsifier. And so I started looking up and I said, why does this only happen in the US? And it's because it's not that other countries have banned these ingredients. There is a very common perception that the Europe has banned a lot of ingredients that are allowed in US food. Like, yes, that is the case, but also it's more complicated than that. So it's not that these things are banned outside the US. It's just that the US uses a higher concentration of them in the food. So firstly, I'm having more processed dairy or processed food in general, just being in the US. And then also, carrageenan might exist in a processed cheese in Spain, but in a much smaller percentage. And so it's not enough to trigger an allergic reaction from me. But in the US, and I'll tell you, I eat fairly healthy, but I was just there for, a live event, like a business retreat. And, my hotel has milk to put in the coffee, but it's not milk, it's half and half, and it's in one of those metal containers and I can't see what's in it. Or there's cheese on things, or I think the lunches that we were served at this event were quite healthy, but if I do have to quickly get food, at the airport and things like that, what are they putting in the cheese? Like, what are they putting in the food? And so this is something where I've always had issues with dairy in the US, but living abroad, I have no issues whatsoever. And I've lived in, for example, Georgia, where their diet is bread, cheese, and wine. Like I was eating all the cheese, putting milk in things, never had an issue. Same with Spain. I've never, even China, I've never had any issues. And China's not a very dairy heavy country, but I still did eat dairy there. Never had a problem. But I could even get it like having milk in a latte from a cafe in the US. 2 minutes later, I feel like all my cheeks are puffed up. And so I can't even avoid it because it's just in everything. And so this is just one example from me, but I've heard many, many examples of things like this from people from the US saying, why is it that I can't eat bread in the US and I can in Europe? This doesn't make sense to me. What are we putting in our bread? I even see it just with the shelf life of products. And that's what carrageenan and gums and emulsifiers are doing. It makes the industrialized dairy last longer because that's what a lot of our industry, like food industry, is in the US, is it's industrialized. So how do we make sure that this milk lasts a very long time? But the thing is that I have drank, especially in Georgia, homogenized milk, like milk that doesn't even need to be refrigerated, and I've had no issues. So I'm thinking, what? What is in our dairy that is making me have this allergic reaction, and why does it exist nowhere else, even amongst milk that doesn't need to be refrigerated? And these are the types of things, and this is just my story, but these are the types of stories that I hear all the time. And I'm looking at here thinking, okay, this bread that I buy in Spain, goes bad in a week. This bread from the US has lasted a month and it's still not moldy. What's in there? And these are the types of questions that I see people asking who are ready to leave. And then not only are there the stricter laws that have food be healthier and actually taste better, but also there tends to be, especially in Europe, because that's what we're talking about in this episode, an emphasis on healthier, fresher food. But I lived in Vietnam, I lived in China, even China, which is not known for its food safety, does use more fresh ingredients. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but I'll talk about Europe mainly for right now. My daughter, I said she has a 3-course meal as part of her daycare. Let me describe to you what my 2-year-old is eating, okay? Course 1, fresh paella. Course 2, this is the main course, will be fish and a tomato avocado salad. And then dessert will either be yogurt or a mandarin orange or some sort of fruit. And I'm not talking about the sugary fruit cups. I'm talking like a fresh mandarin, right? Like that's the type of food that she's eating, like grilled fish and tomato and avocado, homemade paella. And they have a cook who works for the school who comes in and cooks all the food fresh for all it's like 1 to 3-year-olds at this school. That is what my 2-year-old daughter is eating at daycare. Meanwhile, at the US, they're trying to argue that tomato, that the marinara sauce on pizza counts as a vegetable. Like that is a big cultural difference. The Spanish would never allow that to happen. And then take it to an extreme. Can you imagine trying to convince the French that pizza is a vegetable? No way. No way. Even, for example, my parents just visited me in Spain. And my mom was not super excited about the fact that most breakfasts in Spain are some sort of something on toast or some sort of sandwich. And she's like, oh my God, why so much bread? Oh, bread for breakfast always. But she started partaking in the Spanish breakfast and then realized the bread here is super fresh, it's super soft, and doesn't make her feel all puffy and bloated like it would in the US. Even Georgia, which I said is like a bread, cheese, wine culture, the bread is made right in front of you in shoti ovens. The cheese is locally made. This is a country where it's, let's stop by the side of the highway to get honey from this guy whose hives are right here, fresh out of the hive. Like that's the culture. Even wine is made in people's backyards. And a lot of it has, the traditional wine has no sulfates, so it barely gives you any sort of a hangover. Fun fact. Right. I had a really interesting conversation my first year living in China, so way back in 2013, about obesity in the US and processed food as opposed to vegetables. And so this conversation that I had with a couple of the other teachers, they said, I don't understand why in the US people are eating a lot of processed food. And I was talking about how like the wealthy can afford to buy fresh organic vegetables, but people who don't have a lot of money, oftentimes there are food deserts. Like you can't get to a grocery store that actually has produce, or all you can afford is super processed food. And they said, I don't understand. Vegetables are so cheap and you could literally grow them in your backyard. Like we're growing vegetables right there, right next to the school. I don't understand why poor people in the US don't have access to vegetables when you could literally just grow them yourself. Shouldn't they be the cheapest thing? And I sat there for a second and I thought, oh my God. In China, vegetables are, little pun here, dirt cheap, right? Because you can literally grow them in your backyard. Like vegetables are extremely cheap in China. They're the cheapest thing that you could buy. But in the US, that's not the case. Our hyper processed food is the cheapest thing. And fresh vegetables, especially organic vegetables and fruits, if you're wanting to not have a bunch of pesticides. And I'm not saying that China's the best with food safety and pesticides, so don't come at me about that. But what I am saying is vegetables are not that cheap. Fresh food is much more expensive than processed food. And I grew up just thinking that was normal. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with some of my coworkers in China that I realized that in many parts of the world, that's not normal. Vegetables are the cheapest thing that you could get. Right? So, I will say from personal experience, it is incredible to live in a country where food isn't industrialized and not everything is processed and groceries are actually affordable. And this is one major thing that people are coming to me about as a motivating factor for wanting to move abroad. Now, on that note, on the note of health, let's talk about healthcare. And now I could do an entire episode in and of itself, like a full hour just talking about the US healthcare system. So I will keep it brief because I think a lot of us know our healthcare system in the US is atrocious, like absolutely atrocious. And yes, our doctors and our nurses work very hard. That's not what I'm critiquing here. What I am critiquing is the privatized insurance system that is, from my perspective, a scam, an absolute scam. I have talked with people who have paid more money for a surgery or a procedure with insurance than without. Right? I went in for knee surgery. The first time I didn't have insurance, I paid X. The second time, I did have insurance that I was paying for and I paid more. I have seen this happen so many times where they bill you for a certain amount and then they go, "Oh, you have insurance? Actually, you owe us more money." That doesn't make any sense. And this idea that you never know what to pay. Like you never know what you're paying for anything until afterwards, which that doesn't make sense, right? If we're using capitalism for healthcare, which is problematic in and of itself, then you should be able to know what you're buying. There was this Vox video. I'm going to try to find it and link it to the show notes, but there was this person who, he and his wife were having a baby and they tried to shop around to figure out what they were going to need to pay before their baby was born. So they started calling hospitals and calling their insurance to see, can I get a quote for an average like vaginal childbirth? Like how much am I going to need to pay? And they couldn't get an answer from anyone. They had to walk in absolutely blind. They couldn't even get an average answer. Meanwhile, I gave birth in Georgia, the country, and I was visiting a hospital, and they gave me a one sheet of paper and they said, these are our prices. And they had the prices listed out. They said 1 day in hospital, $150. Like this cost for the doctor. It costs this much for a vaginal birth, this much for a C-section, this much for an epidural. And they had all the prices listed out, and it only took up half a sheet of paper. And they said, yeah, this is exactly how much you will pay. And everything was included, right? And like I thought I ended up paying way less than I thought I was going to need to pay because 5 days of staying in the hospital was included with my C-section. They were just like, "Oh yeah, that's part of the C-section package." And I'm like, "What? What?" All the aftercare was all just included. And I spent, I would say, without insurance, out of pocket, like before my insurance kicked in, out of pocket, $100 for a private birthing suite with a pull-out couch bed for my husband in a private bathroom. And I had an unplanned C-section. So I'm just going to throw that out there. And then if I look at Spain, right, if I were to have a kid in Spain, it would be free as part of my taxes, as part of my government healthcare. But we can't even get an answer about how much we would have to pay when you're choosing a private hospital in the US, which is just crazy to me. And like I said, I could do an entire episode around just this, but this is a major motivating factor and a major fear from a lot of people in the US. And this is something that I don't think I can properly describe how much the healthcare system in the US weighs on you until you leave and you experience that weight being lifted for yourself. The idea of something happening to you and you not needing to worry if your insurance is going to cover it or not, because worst case scenario, it's not that expensive. Having it lifted of that, the fear of, oh my God, I got to call my insurance and make sure that this is covered. Every time I'm in the US, even when I had US health insurance and something would happen, I would say, and they would say, "Oh, I want you to get this ultrasound." And I go, "How much, like, is that covered by my insurance?" And they go, "Oh, I don't know. You have to talk to your insurance." And so then I'd have to call my insurance on the phone and make sure it's covered. You just don't have to do this in other countries. You just go. And I've lived in countries where healthcare is like universal and included as part of your taxes. I've also lived in countries where I've had private healthcare. Either way, you don't have to worry. You just know that even if you have to pay out of pocket, you can afford it. So, for example, I still don't have my Spanish healthcare yet. It's taken a while to get everything going because I just moved here. But I had tonsillitis. And so I went to the doctor. I was willing to pay out of pocket. I think it was like 25 euros to see a doctor. And so he wanted to get me to get a throat swab, and they couldn't figure out how much it was supposed to cost. They were like, "Wait, so you don't have healthcare? Okay, I have no idea how much this is supposed to cost." So then they were looking through their notes, like trying to figure out how much to charge me because they couldn't do the swab until I had like signed off that I would pay for it. And they came back and they're like, "Okay, we got the number. It's 26 euros." And I'm like, okay, like, sure. It was just such a big deal and it was such a low price. And this is my experience around the entire world, that even when you pay out of pocket, it's just not that expensive. And I have experienced healthcare systems all over the globe. I've been hospitalized with a head injury in Thailand. I'm kind of accident prone, let's be real. I was hospitalized with a head injury in Thailand. I've gotten sea urchin spikes surgically removed from my toes in China. I just had tonsillitis in Spain. I gave birth in Georgia. I would rather go to a doctor in a hospital almost anywhere else, just because of the anxiety around the cost is so extreme. For me now, especially, it feels extra extreme when I go back to the US. I don't want any part of it. There is a reason why a lot of travel insurance policies, like when you say you're traveling to the US, they up your premium by a ton, or they just don't cover US, because in my opinion, it's a scam. So I'm going to tell you a story that's a little bit crazy. And like I said, I could do a whole episode just on this, but when I was living in Tbilisi, Georgia, and now keep in mind, the country of Georgia is smaller than Georgia, the state, and has fewer people than Georgia, the state. And they have done studies that healthcare systems run much better when you have more people paying into them. Now, Georgia is a post-Soviet developing country that does not have a lot of money. Okay? So the average person is not paying a lot into the tax system. Okay. I needed to paint that picture for you. Now, I was having a major medical issue where I was having a very, very strong pain in my chest in the middle of the night. And I thought, oh my God, like I know that heart attacks look different in women than men. I'm not okay. I tried everything to try and get the pain down, like drinking little kitchen concoctions and things like that. And I was in such severe pain. I'm like, I don't know if this is severe acid reflux or my heart. Like, I don't know what this is, but it's not going away. And it's been an hour and I am dying. So we called an ambulance. And so the ambulance came to my house and I was like, I don't even know where the nearest hospital is. I don't know what to do. Let's just call an ambulance. We don't have a car. So the ambulance came to my house and I had no idea. I was like, how much is this going to cost? It can't be that bad, right? We'll just see. So the EMTs come to my house. They check me in my living room. Now I'm ready to go. I've got my passport. I've got my wallet. Like I am like dressed and ready to go to the hospital. They start doing a physical exam on me in the living room and they say, okay, it's not your heart, it's coming from your stomach. So I'm like, okay, acid reflux, got it. And so they actually give me a shot in my kitchen to help with the severe acid reflux. And I was going through a stressful period of my life around this time. So anyway, they give me a shot in the kitchen. And then they start packing up. And I gather my passport, I gather my things, and I start following them out the door. And they're like, oh, no, we're done. And they said, you should start to feel better by now. Are you feeling better? And I said, actually, yeah, it's much better. Meanwhile, in the US, I would still be in the waiting room in extreme pain for a couple hours. So I was feeling much better. And I said, actually, yeah, I feel great. And so they're packing up, they're leaving. And I say, okay, but do you need my insurance? Do you need my passport? Like, what do you need? And they paused and they looked at me and they said, it's free. And then they left. They never billed me. And they had no way of knowing. I could have been a tourist for all they know. They have no way of knowing that I actually did have healthcare coverage. They didn't ask for my insurance. They didn't ask for my passport. I don't even think they knew what my name was. They just came and they treated me and they left. And so, what I say to people, and I'm getting on my soapbox for a second, but I need you to hear this. When I say to people, I need to collect myself for a second. I'm getting worked up. When people say to me, but Rochelle, we can't have universal health care in this country. It's too difficult. It's too expensive. If a post Soviet developing country that's super teeny tiny and has a very small population of people who don't have a lot of money can afford to do that, why can't the richest country in the world? So I have people coming to me that are sick and tired of it, that are saying, if I'm going to be paying taxes and healthcare in the US, because people freak out about taxes in Europe, when you do the math and you look at what you're paying for taxes and healthcare in the US, and then you look at what you're paying for just taxes in Europe, sometimes it's actually lower, especially when you factor in things like not needing a car and car insurance and that kind of thing. Sometimes it's lower. And even if it's the same, I have had people come to me in the US and say, I would rather my tax dollars go towards healthcare than towards bombs. Like, I want to live, and this goes back to the social values, but I want to live in a country where I don't have to worry about this anymore. I had a client who she and two kids had major medical conditions. Okay. And it was to the point where they were starting to need to do some experimental treatments because nothing was working. The day that they were moving to France, actually, one of the children was in the hospital. Okay. She calculated how much their family spends on healthcare. It was insurance, copays, premiums, extra specialists, experimental treatments, medications, the whole thing. They were paying $100,000 a year as a family for their medical care. And thankfully, her husband is a private practice therapist and was making like decent money. But even then, they couldn't get ahead because all of their money was going to healthcare. And they moved to France. And now, not only are they spending a fraction of that, an absolute fraction of that, but some of their health issues have gone away. She said, I'm finally feeling to a place where I could feasibly work. And I haven't been able to work in years. None of our kids have ended up in the hospital. Like a lot of our medical issues, and this kind of goes to the health of the food and the environment, are gone. And I hear these types of stories time and time and time again. So it's not just the cost, but it's also the fact that certain treatments that are considered experimental in the US or insurance won't cover in the US are actually covered overseas. I had a friend with chronic Lyme disease in the US, and that's not considered a real condition in the US. Meanwhile, in many countries in Europe, it is. And so he was able to move to Germany and get treatment there. Whereas in the US, it's experimental and it's not real. So we see people migrating just for better healthcare. And yet there is this belief that we've been taught in the US that our healthcare is so expensive because it's the best. When in reality, our healthcare is so expensive because it's lining people's pockets. Where is that money actually going? Even all the way back to the year I was born, my mom brought her own things to the hospital when she was giving birth to me, and they charged her a big amount of money. I can't remember how much it was for these like birthing supplies that she never took. She told them, I don't want any of those. I brought it from home. And so she asked for an itemized bill of what they charged her. They charged her, this is, keep in mind, I'm in my mid 30s. So they charged her $100 for a couple of maxi pads and some Tylenol. Where is that money going? And so this isn't just me getting on my soapbox. I'm just explaining to you the thought process that many Americans have around our healthcare system and how we're sick of it and we want something better. Especially if you work for yourself and you start actually making money in your business. So many of my clients are paying $1,000 a month for healthcare or more for one person. $1,000 a month. And when you factor in having children on top of, oh my gosh. And so what happens is you are stuck working for a corporation, or you're stuck playing small in your business so that you can get on, government health insurance. And so we're veering into another topic. We're getting into my own personal thoughts on this here. But I do believe, from what I'm seeing, that the US claims to love small businesses and entrepreneurs, and we have this culture of entrepreneurship. But our healthcare system makes that almost impossible. Because if you're paying $1,000 a month in healthcare, you better be making good money in your business. And that makes things like freelancing or having like a solopreneur style business extremely difficult. You better have a company where you can afford to get on a healthcare package, or you better be making enough money that you can pay that $1,000 a month in healthcare, or you better have a partner who can get the family good insurance. I've talked to so many people who wanted to have businesses but wouldn't because their family relies on them for healthcare, or who wanted to retire early but couldn't because they needed the healthcare. And moving abroad solves that problem. So I am a firm believer that if you work for yourself, especially like if you work for yourself online, moving abroad is one of the best, most economical things that you could possibly ever do. And the reason why I'm saying that, yes, that's my belief, but that is also a lot of the people who come to me looking to move. That is something that they're looking to get out of this process and why they want to relocate. Okay, last one. I was talking about that forever. Last one, safety and gun violence. You don't realize how much we live in fear all the time until you leave. And it's not just healthcare fear. It's safety and gun violence. So when I arrived at the Boston airport about a week ago, when I got to the US, the very first conversation I overheard was at the transfer counter, and two airline employees were talking to each other, and one said, "Oh yeah, did you hear about that mass shooting yesterday?" And the other person said, "Oh, was it at a school?" You will never hear a conversation like that in any other country on earth. I'm serious. That's not normal. That is 100% not normal. And I have talked to so many parents, especially parents, who want to leave for this reason alone. I don't feel safe sending my kids to school in the US. We recently had a guest on our podcast, a couple that moved to the Netherlands, who said every day was this sinking feeling of, I should not be sending my kids to school. It's not safe, but I have to because we both have to work to afford our life here and get health insurance. And so they said it just felt completely out of alignment with our values as parents, sending our kids into a situation every day that we knew was actively dangerous for them. And the US is not the only country with guns. I lived in Georgia. Georgia has guns, like legally you can have a gun. They don't have this mass shooting issue because our mass shooting issue is cultural. It's a cultural issue. There are other countries that allow firearms, but you only hear about these mass shootings in the US. The only other countries where you hear of this level of mass scale violence, I'm not talking about pickpocketing or mugging and things like that. I'm talking about mass deaths, are countries that are actively at war or having some sort of revolution or insurrection, right? Like, you just don't hear about this type of thing happening internally without that level of like political strife, right? Happening at our schools, malls, movie theaters, concerts, places where we should be able to gather together and be safe. And so I hear from parents, oh, I'm homeschooling now, but I can't really afford it. Or I'm sending my son to private school because I'm worried about gun violence and I think it's less likely to happen at this school, but this school is bankrupting me. It's thousands of dollars a month. This is not normal. And I feel it every time I go home to the US. I feel that sense of lack of safety in a way that I just don't have in other countries. And I feel it not only in my own body, but I feel it from the people around me. I'm more aware of what the people around me are doing, where their hands are placed. If people walk really close to me, I'm more aware of it than pretty much any other country I've ever lived. Just keep in mind, I haven't just lived in Europe. I've lived in 6 different countries. And I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail now. I will link to this episode in the show notes. But back in 2024, I actually ran in fear from a grocery store. And I won't get into the whole story now because that story in and of itself takes up a whole episode. But kind of the TLDR summary of it was that somebody was walking around a grocery store very suspiciously, did not have a cart, was there the entire time I was there, was holding something in their hoodie pocket that had an outline of like, I'm like, either that's like a gun or it's like a soda bottle, but I don't know what that is, but kind of holding it with their arm like they didn't want it to be jostled, was like kind of looking around at people very suspiciously. And I'm like, okay, am I gonna have to run? Like if I hear shots fired, there's the exit. I have never felt like that anywhere else in my entire life. Where like, okay, if this happens, I'm gonna run for the exit. So I quickly grabbed what I needed and I was heading out the door. Tell the cashier what I saw, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I think he left." Like, so she'd even registered that he was there, and I'm like, "Okay, no one's doing anything. All right." And keep in mind, this is noon on a Sunday in broad daylight in my parents' like suburban town in Washington State. Okay. And this is a place that I grew up that's supposed to be super safe. So anyway, I'm walking out of the grocery store and he is standing right next to the exit We make eye contact. I look away immediately and keep walking, and he follows right behind me, like extremely close to me. And I'm like, "Oh my god, is this a human trafficking situation? Is he going to put a gun to my back and go get in this car, get in this van?" And so I ran. I sprinted to my car, and as I started running, I saw out of the corner of my eye him throw the hood of his hoodie over his head and beeline it towards a car. So, anyway, that happened in my hometown. Something like that, like those sorts of things, especially with the fear of with guns, because obviously knives and things like that exist all over the world, but especially with the fear of guns, the fear of mass shooting, like that just doesn't happen in a lot of countries all over the world. And so what happens is I have a lot of parents and a lot of women, especially, coming to me saying, I don't feel safe in my country. I want to move somewhere else. Now, those are my 7 main reasons. Just to do a little recap, we have, the political instability and human rights, and also I didn't even mention this in political instability, but people who are exhausted by the political discourse and divisiveness and bracing themselves every time they turn on the news and having people argue about politics. That's also included. That comes up a lot. But political instability and human rights, social values, the cost of living, wanting a better lifestyle for themselves, health and food, healthcare in general, and safety and gun violence. So those are the biggest 7 reasons that people come to me wanting to relocate internationally, specifically to Europe. That's the most commonly requested area of the world to move to. Now, I want to talk about one final change that I've been seeing in the landscape, and that is that the narrative is changing. So, we grew up learning that the US is a country that you move to, not a country that you leave. There was this pervasive opinion that we should be lucky that we were born here, and that is very true, right? Of many of the countries that we could be born in, there are some major privileges being born in the US. 100%. Our passport is decently strong. English as a native language privilege, sort of cultural soft power privileges that come from being from the US. So that is true. Like there is a big privilege to being born in the US. Like I said, don't hate the US, but there was this feeling that and this pervasive language around US is a country that you move to, not a country that you leave. And we take it to the extreme. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say the US is the best country in the world. And I'm like, best at what? Anyway, I won't go there. But this was how many of us grew up. And this is a country that many people struggle to move here, or we hear stories about, oh, they were doctors or lawyers in their country and now they're here working at a convenience store, driving a taxi because they want to come here because American dream. Like this was the narrative that we were taught growing up, and the idea of leaving was crazy or unrealistic, or you had to have a very good reason for moving overseas. And if you were on the younger side, like when I moved in my 20s, the idea was that this is a phase and that you will come home. Eventually she's going to come home, she's going to grow up and get a real job. Well, newsflash, it's been 13 years and instead of a real job, I run a business. So there was this thought though, is if you go in your 20s, you're just getting it out of your system and then you'll come back home and you'll settle down and you'll get a real job. But the biggest difference that I've seen in the last year or so is that more and more people get it. They understand. More people are coming to me wanting to move abroad forever than ever before. Typically, a couple years ago, it was, I'm going to move for a couple years and then come back. Now it's, I'm never coming back. And now more and more people are nervous to tell their friends and family that they're moving. But when they finally do, they are shocked to hear, me too. Oh, really? I'm interested too. It used to be something that I would say in my community where people felt crazy for wanting to move abroad. Nobody in their life got it. That still happens. I still get a lot of people who are like, I don't know anyone who wants to do this. But more and more and more and more, people are surprised when they start opening up to their friends and their family. Their friends and their family are also interested in coming too, because it's now no longer seen as this divergent life choice, right? We are in the middle of a transition where Americans are looking for a new American dream, which for many people is in Europe. And it's becoming more and more and more common. And I can speak from experience because I'm here. I'm in this industry. I also live in Europe. I'm seeing it happen in real time, right? Over the course of the last 13 years, we have finally reached a point where the idea of living abroad is now seen as normal, which in the past, it never was, right? It's part of the discourse now. You can see with some of the stats that I mentioned earlier, and that let me scroll back up to make sure I don't mess up this stat. In 2025, 40% of women aged 15 to 44 said that they would move abroad permanently if they had the opportunity, which is 4 times higher than 2014, which was only 10%. So you can see in 10 years, we went from 10% to 40%. It is becoming so much more common. It's becoming part of the discourse. And I think part of this too is the rise of remote work and the emergence of digital nomad visas, which make this more achievable. When I first moved abroad in 2013, your only options were teach English, mainly in Asia, teach English, be a freelancer, but it was typically like freelance writers and graphic designers, or get a job on the ground with like an international company that would transfer you. Those were the 3 most common ways that people lived abroad. Or people who took sabbaticals and traveled for a year. Like that, those were your options. Digital nomad visas didn't exist. I remember when Estonia, shout out to Estonia, was the first country to come out with a digital nomad visa. But now, with all of this remote work and the fact that digital nomad visas exist, more and more people are seeing this as a choice that they could feasibly make. And then when you factor in social media and the general media and these Gallup polls like actually showcasing the interest, now all of a sudden this feels like a real choice. Now all of a sudden you don't have to throw away your career and teach English. You could feasibly move to a lot of different countries in Europe, taking your current work contract or freelancing or coaching in a subject that you're knowledgeable in. You could take your passive income from property rentals or your retirement savings and go to a country that has visas specifically for retirees. Many of these countries are making it super easy for us to move here. And many Americans are taking advantage of that. So, if you want this, you are not crazy. People are doing this and you're allowed to want this. And I'm here to help you. So, for those of you listening to this right now who want some help, the easiest place to get started working with me is to join our Move Abroad Master Plan program. This is only $37. It is the perfect way to get into my world and to get started on this journey. So let me tell you a little bit about what it is, okay? So what you're going to do when you join is I have a 6-lesson program that you will go through, and they're all very bingeable. We're talking 10 to 15 minutes each lesson. And what we're going to do over the course of the 6 lessons is we are going to talk about, well, firstly, is this even possible for you? Do you check the boxes? Is it possible for you? And if yes, we are going to create your own custom move abroad plan. We're going to talk about what is your income source? What kind of visa do you need? What types of countries are we looking at here? and then putting it together in a way where all of the pieces work together and putting a time on it, right, of when you're going to actually move. And so once you create this plan, then you're going to hop on a call with someone from my team, and you're going to talk about any of the challenges that are coming up for you around implementing it, what your goals actually are. You'll read out your plan to the person from my team. And then we'll talk about what you need if you want to actually implement it and make this happen. So the call is completely included as part of Move Abroad Master Plan, because I want you to actually talk about this with someone. And like I said, this entire thing is only $37. So if you are interested, it's just moveabroadcourse.com. I will link to it below. And of course, if you want to jump right in and work with us intensively, we do actually offer 6-month coaching packages where you have your own private Move Abroad coach. We will work with you through the process. You'll have calls with me as well. So if you are interested in that, I will pop a link below as well, where you can actually hop on a call with someone from our team and talk about what you're looking for and what you want to get out of working with a coach. And we'll see if you're a good fit to work with us intensively. And if you are, we'll talk a little bit about what that might look like. So those calls are completely free. You just talk with someone on our team and we'll see if you're a good fit for intensive coaching with us. Now, if you are enjoying this episode, we have to subscribe. We have new episodes every Tuesday. And so you can subscribe on your podcast player of choice. We are also on YouTube now. So if you are watching on YouTube, hello. So you can subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe on the podcast. It's just Move Abroad Coach podcast. And I would love to have you continue to join us. Like I said, new episodes every Tuesday, every single week. So thank you so much for joining me. And let me know either on YouTube in the comments or on Instagram, Move Abroad Coach. I want to know which of those 7 resonated with you the most. Which of those 7 is strongest for you or is your primary motivator for wanting to move overseas? I am super curious. I want to know which one wins. So I'll do a poll on my Instagram, but just let me know. Send me a DM. I'm curious. And if you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments which one was strongest for you. All right, that's everything for me today, and I'll see you next week. Bye.